Hello and welcome to World News on TVP World. I'm Marie Cato. NATO foreign ministers have just wrapped up 2 days of meetings in Brussels, with the US Secretary of State's participation going better than expected. Our Europe correspondent Alex Cadier is at NATO headquarters. Good afternoon, Alex. What did the ministers agree upon in the end?
Good afternoon. Well, it sounds like the message from the foreign ministers, broadly speaking, is keep calm and carry on. That was the message from Mark Rutte, the Secretary-General, just in the last few moments giving a press conference. He was asked repeatedly by journalists, well, what about these tariffs? What about this trade war? Could that impact the NATO alliance's ability to spend on its defense? He did not want to be drawn in to that discussion. He said those are national decisions for national governments and that he would not comment. But nevertheless, this day two of this foreign ministerial meeting clearly still overshadowed by those potential trade war between the European allies of NATO, Canada and the United States' Trump administration. Clearly a difficult position for these ministers. Nevertheless, we have heard commitments from NATO allies, particularly from Poland, about ramping up their spending. We heard from Foreign Minister Sikorski. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
We have doubled our spending on defense since Donald Trump took office for the first time. That's impressive. We are going to spend another 800 billion from EU funds. We are doing a lot. We'll do even more. And the tariffs, I understand, are being imposed because Europe is actually very successful and has a trade surplus. But we hope that the United States will also take into account the fact that the US, on the other hand, has a huge surplus in services.
So clearly that message of keeping calm and carrying on by the foreign minister there, that has been echoed by some. We heard a joke actually from the French delegation in their opening remarks yesterday, thanking the United States for making those percentage of GDP targets easier to reach by destroying the global economy. So a moment of levity, a moment of lightness in an otherwise very serious meeting here at NATO.
We face real threats to our security, the most direct from Russia, but also from others, state and non-state, in the high north, from the south, on the eastern flank, and in cyberspace. Whatever the challenges we face, we need to make sure that we have the forces and capabilities necessary to deter aggression and defend ourselves should anyone make the mistake of attacking. So we will invest more, much more, as so many allies have already begun to do. We will produce more and more quickly. All over the alliance, we will work to cut red tape and reduce barriers to efficient defense industrial production in order to meet the very real demand for more defense capabilities.
So there you heard from Secretary-General Mark Rutte making it clear that NATO is taking a lot of its external threats seriously, particularly from Russia, and that is why we've heard that pressure from him, from the United States, to ramp up defense spending. Of course, leading the pack is Poland at 4.7% by the end of this year, announcing yesterday they would hit 5% in 2026. Some countries lagging far behind, below that 2% target, will have to step up very quickly indeed.
Thank you, Alex, for that report. That's Alex Cadier reporting live from Brussels. French and British high-ranking military officials arrived in Kyiv on Friday for talks with their Ukrainian counterparts on the possible deployment of troops as part of a ceasefire deal. The talks come after last week's gathering of the so-called Coalition of the Willing, a group of European countries supporting Ukraine in the war against Russia. During the Paris meeting, leaders pledged to strengthen Kyiv's army for future security. On Friday, French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot said that even once peace is achieved, maintaining military reassurance and will remain essential. President Trump cannot afford for the Ukraine peace process to fail because the world is watching. That's according to a leading Ukrainian politician. Kira Rudik told TVP World on the record that if Donald Trump weakens under pressure from Vladimir Putin, then he can expect China, Iran and North Korea to be emboldened.
We have been in this ceasefire negotiations with Russia since 2014. Adam, I think it has been more than 200 rounds of negotiations. And this is what I believe President Zelensky was trying to deliver to President Trump, this information, learn from our mistakes, don't get into the same trap. Well, unfortunately, there are some mistakes that people want to repeat themselves. And so right now we see what we see, that President Trump is trying to leave some of the maybe areas of negotiations with Putin. I don't think that he will succeed. However, again, this is on him. He cannot roll back and say, I'm not interested in Ukraine anymore, because it's not only about Ukraine. Right now, Europe, right now, China, Iran, North Korea, and all the other allies, they are just watching of what's going to happen. And I'm absolutely sure that if that will be seen as weakness by the leader of the democratic world, I'm sure that it will lead to some decisions that China will make, that North Korea will make, Iran will make, and it will not be a step towards stability.
Overnight, Russian drone strikes on Kharkiv, the Zaporizhia region and Dnipro killed and wounded civilians and severely damaged buildings. Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, has been targeted extensively over the last week.
At least 4 people have been killed and more than 30 wounded in Kharkiv. The city, located only 30 kilometers from the border with Russia, has suffered greatly over the past week, with attacks occurring nearly every night. At least 7 drones were launched across the region of Zaporizhia overnight. Attacks continued in the morning. Authorities say a 63-year-old man and a 70-year-old woman were wounded in the attack. The strike sparked a fire at a store which spread across 100 square meters before being extinguished by firefighters responding to the attack. The local emergency department said the blast also damaged neighbouring houses and vehicles. In the central city of Dnipro, local authorities reported that a mass drone attack left 3 people wounded.
European Defence Commissioner Andrius Kubilius visited the Polish Parliament today, praising Poland's strong defence spending and urging for deeper investment in Europe's defence industry. For more on his message and its impact, we go live now to Sasha Farbach on site. Good afternoon, Sasha. What did the Commissioner reveal about Brussels' defence plans? Will there be more financing available?
Hi there, Marie. Well, exactly. This is about ramping up. We've heard that in the other reports. We've heard that for a while now. So what does that mean? It's about financing. Where's the money going to come from? Big numbers here that we heard from all the different things from the European Union. Now, the man in charge to try and push that ramp up is Andrius Kubilius, as you mentioned. So addressing here members of the Polish Parliament, also representatives from state assets and also from the Ministry of Defense, giving his take on what's required to push more across the European Union. That white paper that's now released with setting out challenges, things ahead that need to be done. 2 things that were also very interesting, speaking to him here on the sidelines in the Polish Parliament, was about cohesion funds. Remember, this is usually made for regional investment. These are different projects that are financed together. And he said some very interesting things. It concerns about 392 billion euros, and also about the European Investment Bank, the lending arm of the European Union. So let's hear what he told us here just a few moments ago.
No changes into regulation on cohesion funds in Commission, so now they need to be approved by Council. And we are, with our proposed changes, it will be allowed for member states in a voluntary way to use the cohesion funds which are allocated to them to invest them into development of defense industry.
So these cohesion funds, so let's also remember here, this is not straight directly for military applications. It will not be used to buy tanks, but they will be about this mobility and infrastructure. That means bridges, key crossing points for tanks and other military infrastructure, so-called dual use here. So that's going to be key, and also very much about East Shield, the Baltic defense line, key projects, not just for Poland and the Baltic states, for all of the European Union. And that's the latest here from the Polish Parliament. Back to you, Marie, in the studio.
Thanks, Sasha, for that update. Sasha Farbach reporting from the Polish Parliament. More F-16 fighter jets are on their way to Ukraine, according to U.S. General Christopher Cavoli, commander of the United States European Command, who also praised Poland's expanding role on NATO's eastern flank. While the additional aircraft aim to reinforce Kyiv's air force, Poland's massive defense spending is rapidly turning it into a bulwark of collective security in Central and Eastern Europe.
Will come to order.
Speaking at a recent Senate hearing, General Cavoli stressed the United States' commitment to strengthen Ukraine's air capabilities. President Volodymyr Zelensky has already confirmed the arrival of new F-16s, signaling ongoing efforts to fortify the country's skies.
More F-16s prepared to be deployed in there. There are more pilots in the training pipeline, sir. I can give you the numbers in closed session. They are active. The planes are active, and they fly every day. They've defeated a large number of cruise missile threats, and they've delivered an awful lot of offensive attacks as well, specifically bombing attacks in the east.
While the majority of F-16s for Ukraine have come from northern European nations, including the Netherlands, Denmark and Norway, the arrival of more US-trained pilots and jets could fundamentally bolster Kyiv capability against Russian missiles and frontline positions. General Cavoli also highlighted Warsaw's defense buildup, crediting Poland for its rising military spending and integration with the alliance.
Poland's at 4.7% of GDP. Right? As a benchmark, we are at about 3.4%. So this is a country that has had very rapid economic growth sustained over the last 15 years and is committing it to correct an imbalance in their defensive capability.
Further in his testimony, he highlighted how Warsaw has rapidly modernized its forces.
They're buying vast quantities of U.S. equipment, by the way, but more important, they're integrating it with the alliance, and they're making it available to the alliance for collective defense, which is fantastic. They are rapidly becoming the bulwark of our ground defenses on the eastern flank.
General Cavoli, who assumed his post in July 2022, remains focused on reinforcing NATO's deterrence capabilities, though he has indicated plans for retirement in the near future. For now, Ukraine's incoming F-16s and Poland's surge in military preparedness reflect a broader pivot in the region, as NATO allies brace for evolving security challenges on Europe's eastern doorstep.
For your attendance at this ceremony.
Intense demining work continues in Croatia, where authorities have announced that the country will be free of mine hazards by March 1st next year.
The demining process in Croatia, which has been going on for 3 decades, is expected to be completed by spring of 2025.
At the end of this year, we will complete all operations, and on March 1st, 2026, we will declare Croatia free from mine danger.
The Croatian government adopted the 2025 Mine Action Plan at its meeting in early March. The plan includes the exploration and demining of nearly 50 square kilometers of the remaining areas contaminated with mines and unexploded ordnance during Croatia's 4-year War of Independence, which ended in 1995.
Since 1996, 610 people in Croatia have been victims of mines and explosive remnants of war, of which 207 died and 31 were under the age of 18, of which 6 died. And what we always want to emphasize is that 134 demining workers have been victims, of which 40 died.
A total of 76.3 million euros have been allocated for demining activities this year, with more than half coming from EU funds.
South Korea's Constitutional Court has upheld President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment over his declaration of martial law. The court voted unanimously to remove President Yoon from office for violating the South Korean constitution.
Crowds erupted in cheers in central Seoul, celebrating the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. The Constitutional Court upheld Parliament's impeachment motion over Yoon's short-lived imposition of martial law last year that sparked the country's worst political crisis in decades. While many South Koreans welcome Yoon's impeachment, some fret over more political chaos.
I believe the power of the democratic citizens of our country played a significant role in facilitating the unanimous impeachment of Yoon. I hope such an event never happens again.
I think the people's sentiment was well reflected in this case. The state of martial law caused a lot of economic and cultural damage. It is unfortunate that during such a politically chaotic time that this development might add further chaos.
With Yoon's ouster, the country's constitution requires a new presidential election to be held within the next 60 days.
And that wraps up World News at 2 p.m. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.